Travelers are facing extremely long lines at TSA checkpoints. Some airports reporting 3 to 4 hour waits. Travel expert Colleen Kelly says it'll probably get worse.
171 million travelers going on right now for spring break. So it's going to be unprecedented. Add that TSA workers, there's not as many there, and this whole government shutdown. And it's going to be a very difficult March and April. Not to say that you can't travel, but you must have some tips in your back pocket in terms of traveling. For instance, I always tell people to get there 2 hours early for domestic flights. Not the case. As you can see from the lines there at the airport, this is unprecedented. The lines are just incredible. So 3 hours before a domestic flight, 4+ before an international flight.
A conservative columnist says it is becoming increasingly evident that Democrats are working hard to prevent President Trump from taking out evil dictators around the globe.
Robert Nunn is a columnist for the Washington Times. His latest column is entitled, "Kane's Mutiny is in line with Democrats' defeatism." In it, he points out how Democrats like Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia go out of their way to try to hinder President Trump's efforts to protect America from threats like Venezuela and Iran.
Virginia Democratic Senator Tim Kaine has been among the Democratic leaders condemning President Trump for the attacks on Iran and even on Venezuela. So in a couple master strokes, President Trump has stopped a big threat in South America and is hurting Russia and China by decapitating the dictatorship in Iran. That's pretty good work for a month's time.
Knight says Democrats reflexively take the side against America.
Trump takes out a regime that has said death to America, and so Democratic leaders condemn him and say, oh, you should have gotten our permission first. Why? Presidents have found out that there are Democrats in Congress who will sell out this country and leak intelligence information. And President Trump wasn't willing to risk that, and I'm glad he didn't.
I'm Chad Groening.
2 men who openly support the terrorist group ISIS have been indicted on terrorism charges in connection to the attempted bombing at Gracie Mansion in New York over the weekend. Ryan Morrow is president of the Morrow Institute and is a foreign threats expert.
Well, I think that what you're seeing is another episode of what I've called the Jihad Olympics, where you have groups like ISIS that get very frustrated at not getting any oxygen or attention because everything has been focused on Hamas, Hezbollah, the Iranian regime especially, which are their rivals. And so there is going to be the pressure on ISIS supporters to carry out an attack.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
Do you believe in the absolute inerrancy of God's holy word? Do you believe in the power of the Holy Spirit to radically change lives and empower us to live like Christ? At Wesley Biblical Seminary, we believe God is raising up a movement of people across our nation and across the world. And if you believe these are the kinds of pastors we need leading our churches in the future, we invite you to learn more about partnering with us through giving. Learn more about Wesley Biblical Seminary at wbs.edu today.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Tuesday, March 10th, and as the conflict in Iran continues, oil prices are swinging wildly, according to the AP, and threatens transport routes and production across the Middle East. And so the widening Iran conflict has upended oil production and shipping across the Middle East, straining energy supplies worldwide. Those disruptions caused oil to spike Monday, only for it to swiftly fall back after President Donald Trump suggested that the conflict, or the war as they're characterizing it, would be near an end. And so what does this mean overall for oil prices? Will we see prices affect us at the gas pump? Well, let's welcome in Tho Bishop, who is the comms director for the Mises Institute. And Tho, where are we at with oil?
I think that's a good question. Uncertainty is the name of the game And I don't think anyone knows at this point how long this war is going to last. And ultimately, that's where everything comes down to. I mean, we saw in the course of 24 hours, the administration bring up the draft being on the table to the president saying that he thinks the war might be mostly over. And so it's this constant swinging from, exactly where this conflict, what are the expectations needed for the conflict to end? What does an off-ramp look like? Is Iran interested in an off-ramp in its own retaliation, right? So until there's any sort of clear semblance of a result in this conflict, then where the oil market can go with such a major vein, such a major highway of shipments in the strait there is anyone's guess at this point.
Yeah, and it is fascinating how unclear the White House is being about exactly what is going on. I mean, usually President Trump is pretty precise, even if he articulates it in his own way. But to your point about the draft, I mean, the press secretary said, President Trump always keeps all options on the table, and he himself said, I believe it was during a press pool on Air Force One, that this would have to be something that would be an extraordinary circumstance for him to invoke that. But even just the possible hint and suggestion is kind of, in a sense, playing into the left and trying to characterize this as more of an ongoing war instead of a strategic operation that will end in just a few weeks. I mean, do we anticipate this kind of going the way of the Ukraine war, where, everyone thought that would be over in a matter of weeks, and now, here we are years and years into it, and it seems like there's just no end forthcoming?
Well, that's the scary thing right now, is that, I think it's clear going into it there was general objectives in place. But it's one thing to launch, to blow things up and to destroy the infrastructure of a country and going after military installations and another. It's another thing to win the peace and to bring stability. And in particular, you have an actor like Iran that has such extensive missile capabilities, that has a significant drone fleet. When we have so many allies in the area, not simply Israel, but the Gulf states, when we have significant resources such as oil and such as the Strait of Hormuz, and such the amount of commerce and global traffic that comes into that, and the ability to inflict pain relatively cheaply, should you be in a situation where it's kind of a wounded animal effect. I mean, it is something that it's completely different than all the other in-out operations from the administration and Venezuela, Iran in the past, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that this is uncharted territory for what we've seen from the Trump doctrine of foreign policy. And with that, there's an open-ended possibilities of where things last. I think there's a lot of trust from the president's voters that this is something in and out. That I think there's the interest, the support for a prolonged conflict, even amongst the president's deep supporters. I think it starts running out very quickly if we start talking about months rather than weeks, and heaven forbid years. The domestic cost, including on the energy front, and the way that it's eroding the message of affordability and economic gains and things like that, right? This is a very complicated and costly conflict, not simply, going to the gas pump right now, but there's significant political cost. To speak nothing of, the fact that we've already lost, I've reported 7 American service members. This is and then again, within all of this is the global economy that, is not the sort of environment that you want to be disrupting going into midterms, to put it crassly.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and I'm speaking with Tho Bishop, who's the content director for the Mises Institute. And, this kind of market instability that Trump is willing to navigate right ahead of the midterms is a little bit counterintuitive to what's kind of always been the Trump doctrine. And yet he clearly very strongly believes in the strategic objectives that he's outlined and, the ongoing win, however he might characterize that. And so, when it comes to things like market instability, like potentially gas prices, oil prices, and all of that, how assuming that this continues over the next, say even several months, how much of this do you attribute to actual supply disruption versus like a geopolitical risk premium priced into markets specifically for oil, and then the economy just being an instability of not knowing exactly when this conflict will end?
I think it's impossible to pull apart those three factors there, but all of them I think go hand in hand, and that's the difficulty of the entire situation. I know the administration has made attempts to try to offset the loss of insurance markets for shipping using, basically using the federal government as a backstop, which I think is an interesting proposal within this sort of unique situation that not have immediate payoff, right? Getting captains actually driving large vessels through with the threat of attack there is a little bit different than just simply making sure that their insurance is taken care of. That situation, and we're talking about the economic decisions of massive investments. Certainty in the course of weeks, months, years is a major factor for how capital is allocated. And that's the other dynamic to it is that we are the disruptions in this region, and particularly if there is no clear if say a post-conflict Iraq, post-war Iran is even more radical, more unhinged than it was prior to this conflict. I know that's kind of difficult for people to even, I think, comprehend, given the way that Khomeini and this the perception of Iran. But if you have a hardliner, even crazier son taking over, right, then that elevates risk in the region generally. Even if you had a end of direct military hostilities, that would certainly impact prices in terms of the immediate threats to fleets. But there's still the risk of general regional uncertainty. So this is one of yet another major stress to the global economy, and hopefully, there is a path to stability. There is a opportunity for a deal on the table to not only reopen up commerce in the region, but to bring stability in Iran, even if it's with the sort of leader that we typically would not like. Syria, for example, you've got a former ISIS leader that is a country that has been willing to play ball on geopolitical issues. There are paths out there that can resemble stability that could have lasting positive impacts in the region, and particularly Donald Trump's legacy, which I think probably plays a major role in his ambitions here. But in the short term, the range of outcomes can go anywhere from several more weeks of increased prices at the pump to something much longer and much more devastating, both to the global economy and to average Americans.
Yeah, and it's interesting how all of this is being played out this close to the midterms. And so assuming that this conflict does continue over the next couple of months instead of being resolved more quickly, where do you think the sort of fault line lies in terms of the public perception and the voters' perception of the impact of this conflict on the economy for purposes of the midterms? I mean, at what point do people, is it kind of too late to say, okay, well, whatever the economy is doing, anything that is potentially negative is now attributable to Iran and therefore President Trump that may have a negative impact?
If war is measured in months and not weeks, then I think it's going to be a disaster in the midterms, personally. Not only because of the economic cost, the relative lack of general bringing Americans on board this campaign, right? Selling the campaign. And then also a massive generational gap when it comes to this conflict, and really, in any sort of appetite for military adventurism overseas in general. The way that this war is perceived by independents, by younger voters, by that large part of the 2024 coalition, deeply in the red, and that's just right now. I think some of that, if we have it into the conflict by Friday, for example, just to pull a date out there, and into something lasting, right? It's not, okay, we're pulling out, and then all of a sudden we've got more attacks going in there, and we have to kind of play a peacekeeping role or have some sort of follow-up action. If you have something immediate, lasting, then maybe the opponents of the conflict kind of forget about it. The anxiety around what could be prices at the pump go back up. Maybe the political costs, ignoring any arguments about the geopolitical benefits or the legacy benefits or the way history sees it, right? Just the immediate political consequences. Maybe it becomes a less of an impact, or maybe even a slight positive. If in the short term, and this thing starts going on and on and on. Then I think this is going to be a major political consequence, because again, the appetite is just not there, and it's not simply going to be measured in terms of a disinterest in military adventurism overseas, but a real impact into how this is going to affect people's wallets. Because again, the longer it goes up, the risk goes up, cost of the pump goes up, and so it's a very dangerous situation politically. On top of everything that within the conflict itself.
Yeah, and one last question for you, Tho Bishop, and I really appreciate your time this morning breaking this down. In the 2022 midterms, inflation mattered, and we heard about, Bidenflation and all of this through the 2024 presidential election, but we're not talking about that nearly as much as we are oil prices and other things related to Iran. And so how much do you think that inflation may play into the voters' mindset come November?
Well, I think that's the interesting part in all this, is that one of the most positive things that the administration has had has been oil prices, and the effect that oil prices has such a dramatic impact on so many other goods because of transportation costs, because of a variety of reasons there. The extent to which Trump administration policies were able to significantly decrease oil prices, which helped offset in some ways some of the cost of tariffs and things like that. And so you had, a meaningful reduction in the rate of price inflation. That is why this particular thing is so dangerous, is because this is hitting at perhaps the strongest aspect of the American economy. I mean, we still have issues with spending. We still have uneven job performances. We still have issues with housing affordability and the like. But it's the gains on deregulation and energy prices that has been the best part of the Trump economy. So this goes right into that. So that's again why this is such a particularly big deal for the economy, both for consumers and for political fallout.
Yeah, well, we got to take a break here, but really fascinating stuff, and it's going to be interesting, Tho Bishop, to see how all of this plays out the closer we get to November and where the economy is actually situated. That, of course, is going to be a key voting issue like it always is, but hopefully Americans will turn their attention more toward the values voting of understanding who exactly will protect the American way of life, our law, our culture, all of that, handing over power to, the extreme leftist regime. So a lot to be praying for and focused on heading into November. And so you can always follow Tho Bishop on X, and we will be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
They're coming for your family, not with guns, not with armies, but with laws, with lawsuits, with ballots and bureaucrats. Parental rights are under attack. Marriage is being redefined. Your values, they want them silenced, and they're counting on you to do nothing. But here's the thing, we're not backing down. I'm Walker Wildman, and AFA Action is in the fight, in the legislature, in the courtroom, and at the ballot box. We're stopping bad legislation, we're challenging activist judges, and through iVoter Guide, we're helping Christians vote like it matters, because it does. Thousands of families are already standing with us, and I believe the American family is still worth fighting for. But we can't do it without you, and we need your help today. Visit afaaction.net right now. Give today. Join us on the front lines, because the other side isn't slowing down, and neither can we. afaaction.net. Your voice, your values, your vote.
Okay, here's an assignment for you, if you will. I want you to take some time and think about a getaway that gives you a chance to get together with other people of faith, deepen your walk with God, and make new friends, all while enjoying the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter in Kentucky. I'm talking about joining AFA at the Ark, October 29th and 30th. This is a great opportunity to break away from the grind of everyday life and draw closer to God through special presentations from Patricia Engler and Brian Osborne of Answers in Genesis. It also includes entrance to the Creation Museum on Thursday and the Ark Encounter on Friday. Of course, meals are provided, and Friday's dinner includes a panel discussion with Tony Battagliano, Walker Wildman, and Wesley Wildman, Vice Presidents of American Family Association. This is an event that can fill up quickly, so hurry to afa.net/events to register for AFA at the Ark 2026. afa.net/events.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. Imagine for a moment if a school created a club just for white kids. The national media would generate wall-to-wall coverage. Civil rights groups would file lawsuits, organize marches. There would be righteous outrage from coast to coast, and it would be well-deserved because such a club would be racist. But what if a school created a blacks-only club? Well, that's what happened at Mount Nittany Middle School in Pennsylvania. The school starting a Black Affinity Club. The club organized by the district's Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Liaison, whatever that is. Libs of TikTok received emails from school officials confirming the existence of the club and also evidence white students were banned from participating. A school leader said the club was meant to be a safe space for the black student population. But in fact, it's a segregated space, and Mount Nittany Middle School is at the very least discriminating against white students. You know, life was so much simpler when schools just had an audiovisual club. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, amid the conflict in the Middle East, tensions are rising here on the home front with several reports of domestic terrorism and this report that a Southwest flight diverts to an Atlanta airport and an armed tactical unit detains a man in a frightening security scare. This coming from Fox News. Southwest passengers held their hands up as armed officers boarded a plane on Friday following a reported security threat. And then on Sunday, the Kansas City International Airport terminal reopened hours after it was evacuated while authorities looked into a potential threat. That coming from AP. The airport spokeswoman said in an email that shortly after 2 p.m. the terminal was reopened. The evacuation began after a threat that surfaced around 11:15 a.m. Flights that landed after the evacuation were held on the taxiway during the shutdown, which the spokesperson said lasted over or about 2 hours. So in a social media post Sunday afternoon, U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said the incident was clear and normal operations are resuming. FBI Director Kash Patel said on social media Sunday afternoon that the FBI reviewed the threat and determined it to not be credible. So that's at least somewhat relieving. But what's going on here really in terms of the domestic front? Let's welcome in Ray Alexander, who is a retired naval officer. And Ray, it seems like in the midst of this Middle East conflict, it's just providing opportunities for perhaps terror cells or others who don't have the best interests of the U.S. and American citizens at heart to show themselves, and these incidents seem to be on the increase.
That's true. On the positive side, most of them, an overwhelming majority of them, appear to be or have proven to be false. False bomb claims, false bomb threats, other kinds of false physical threats. So on the positive side, almost none of them have proven to be an actual threat. There was that incident in New York City in response to a protest where a couple handheld what appeared to be IEDs were thrown in a crowd and then at the police. Then there was a firebombing of a synagogue in Beverly Hills recently on March 2nd. There have been some real threats, but most of them have been proven to be false.
Well, and so that is encouraging that most of them have proven to be false, and the ones that were credible have at least been successfully neutralized. But what does this mean in terms of ongoing security concerns, particularly I think for airlines, because in stories like this where you have especially the video footage that goes viral and these kinds of really scary incidents, quite frankly, it makes people kind of nervous about air travel and other concerns about going to largely populated events and some of these things. How should people analyze the current the current tensions in terms of their decision making?
You're correct. It is so much. It requires very, very little to affect an operation of disruption and psychological warfare on the American people. We live in a free society, and so it's difficult for the American government and police forces to sort of suppress these kinds of efforts, these kinds of attacks, without significantly degrading, our American liberties. And that is part of, the double-edged sword of living in a free country is that, our liberties do allow the freedoms that also make it possible for people, nefarious forces and just malign actors to kind of institute these or establish or affect these disruption in psychological operations. Unfortunately, it's so easy to call in a bomb threat, and then you cause a disruption of air travel in, say, the Kansas City International Airport for hours. Low investment, low risk, but over the course of thousands of calls has an actual disruptive effect on the American life, on everyday life for American citizens. How to respond, understand, just generally big picture, understand that the world is a dangerous place and that we are attempting our best to address one major U.S. enemy in Iran, and that will have cascading effects. Fortunately, we are addressing Iran before it becomes a much larger and more violent regional and global confrontation. But it does have effects on everyday lives, and most people will experience this as inconvenience and anxiety. Very few, because we are addressing it in the way we are proactively. It will be far fewer people that will experience actual violence as a result.
Yeah, and that's encouraging. And, we were talking in the last segment about, some of the economic concerns and, some of these reactions. And I think, while people are very concerned about the economy, when it comes to risk of personal safety, that becomes sort of paramount. And especially in a post 9/11 security culture, particularly with airlines and some of these other security operations. I mean, they've intentionally lowered the threshold for diverting flights or involving law enforcement when there is a potential threat or uncertainty involving an unruly passenger. And does that kind of risk of over response here, especially in this environment that now we're navigating in the midst of the Iran conflict, does this tend to lead to more false flags that are maybe quickly neutralized, but is actually a good thing of an over response rather than kind of a more cavalier attitude toward security?
Yeah, I'm all for reducing the inconveniences of DHS, security checks at airports, and making it quicker to access and easier to move. However, that being said, I think actually some of our increased awareness right now during this Iranian conflict is beneficial and should provide folks a greater sense of comfort. Although I have to say that when a conflict is over, we should go back to scaling back those disruptive DHS inspections at airports and other types of bureaucratic kind of inspections that have proven over time to be essentially not very useful in preventing accidents or in preventing attacks. So to summarize, I agree that DHS does more than I think it should, generally speaking, under normal conditions. However, now it is a useful tool to help prevent real attacks.
Yeah, and and I'm thinking of things like we finally can keep our shoes on at the airport. DHS finally changed that, and I'm just waiting in the midst of all of this for that rule to be rescinded and to kind of go back to some of these post 9/11. But I think you raise a really valid point, right, Alexander, that while some perhaps heightened temporary security measures need to be or should be in place, temporary is kind of the key word, and it seems like whenever we change security protocols or we do this even for a temporary reason, then those often become permanent without kind of any logic or reason behind it, and so it becomes so cumbersome, all kind of in the name of security. And we've seen a lot of privacy and some of this kind of Big Brother sort of government intrusion be the price that we've paid for more of an illusion of security in the kind of a post 9/11 culture. And so how should we consider balancing that, because obviously the American people want to remain safe. I mean, that's clearly a priority, but we also don't want to give over too much to the government in exchange for privacy and security.
Yeah, I think there's room for disruptive policies, practices, and procedures in security to disrupt planning for nefarious actors. So in the military, we call them random anti-terrorism measures, or RAM. And basically, you rely on the fact that real nefarious actors, malign actors, will observe. They will gather information and intelligence, and then they'll build their tactics and plan their attacks. And you disrupt that planning cycle by instituting sort of random protective measures. I can't go into great detail on some of the measures that we do, but for example, you might have an airport say, and this is just an example that I might institute. Let's say we go back to we peel back some of our security measures at airports after this conflict is over. But every once in a while at, say, a given airport, you institute a random controls in some way. Maybe you pull more people out of the line. Maybe you ask them a few additional questions or different questions. There are very subtle ways in which security forces can disrupt planning cycles from malign actors that does not have a massive impact on the public. Of course, you'd have to communicate the intent, and you can do so openly while still maintaining the effectiveness of your random anti-terrorism measures. But by communicating it, you could potentially maybe soften the blow if you happen to be caught up in that additional questioning or increased security measures. Understanding that, generally speaking, everything is going to flow more smoothly for the American public.
So overall, with and that totally makes sense. Do you think that the American public should think about, okay, maybe we're at at heightened security status right now, but overall, should we just consider this kind of business as usual and be okay with flying and just kind of carrying on about our day as normal?
I do think that there is an increased risk. I think that we'd be foolish, not to acknowledge that there's increased risk right now. Over the last 10 years or so, with increased unmitigated access through our border, specifically in the last, during the Biden-Harris administration, it is very difficult. We basically have limited information on the number of people that have flowed across the border. I know the Trump administration has been doing their best to catch up on that. We have to assume that there are malign actors in the United States who may attempt a violent attack. So things like being out in public, if you're out, say, for a 4th of July party, if this thing goes that long, or if you're out for some kind of public gathering, just be aware of what's going on around you. Try to have an escape route planned, kind of standard stuff that military is trained on. Just be aware of your surroundings and have a plan for escape. Have a way to get out, especially when you're lined up along roads, because a very obvious method of attack is vehicle rammings. Stay behind bollards, trees, light posts, things that would disrupt a vehicle, and things like that. Take practical measures, but still go to the parade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and still live your life. I mean, because that's part of, the rise of the social media kind of viral video. Is the unfortunate, perhaps unintended, maybe intended consequence is that, any incident then suddenly has viral attention and people respond often, out of fear of something like that happening again. And so, there's a balance, I think, Ray Alexander, between being, cautious and prudent, but also not being so concerned that you end up not being able to go about your daily life and your daily business, especially when it comes to air travel.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So in just the last couple of minutes that we have with you, you'd mentioned that, this conflict in Iran is happening now so that we don't have a bigger enemy down the road. And so, in your opinion, is this going to be more of a short-term conflict? I mean, I know these are just projections, but do you think that the administration's handling it well?
Yes, I think the administration has not only put into its national defense strategy the expressed lack of interest in democracy building, interventionism, undefined wars, nation building. That's in the actual national defense strategy, and I believe they've put that into effect. I think Midnight Hammer was a good example. I think that the removal of the Venezuelan dictator is a good example. Now, we will affect change in foreign countries to our positive benefit in our national interests, and they may have cascading local effects that we have to deal with later. But the immediate removal of the threat is the key. And I think this administration have learned the lessons of the past 2.5 decades of nation-building attempts in our post-Cold War hubris. That intervention, military interventionism overseas.
Sometimes you need it, and we got to leave it there, Ray Alexander. But really appreciate your commentary this morning, and we will be right back with more to talk to you, Todd Starnes, about some more interesting headlines that you're going to want to hear about. Stay tuned.
Life can be hard, but we have to keep our eyes focused on Jesus. I'm Christy Graham, host of On the Ground with Samaritan's Purse, and I want to encourage you in your walk with God. Listen each week as we go behind the scenes of our work around the world. You'll be challenged and encouraged in your own faith as you hear how God is actively changing lives. Join us for On the Ground with Samaritan's Purse, Sundays at 8:30 a.m. Central, right here on American Family Radio.
To sharpen the biblical worldview of Christians and to share the good news of Jesus Christ. That is the mission of the Christian Worldview radio program. I'm host David Wheaton, inviting you to join us this Saturday morning at 9 Eastern, 8 Central, as we discuss all matters of life and faith from a decidedly biblical perspective. The Christian Worldview, Saturday mornings at 9 Eastern, 8 Central, right here on American Family Radio.
Just as sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because all sinned. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. A popular effort in social revisionism is happening, where racism, which is better described in biblical terms as skin color-based partiality, is a crime of which only people of lighter skin color can be guilty. Let's be clear. Factions, divisions, and dissensions, including those based on skin color, are the fruit of the sinful flesh. The root cause of partiality is sin. Every person, regardless of the quantity of melanin in their skin, is capable of partiality. The only remedy for sin is the blood of Jesus Christ.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
Hey, I'm Brant, and her name is Sherry.
Hello.
She's a friend of mine whom we were just praying for because of a surgery she just went through.
Yes, and I am very happy about something you actually talk about all the time, which is
Medishare.
That is right.
Yeah. So what was your experience like with Medishare and the healthcare bills?
Honestly, Brant, seamless. And what a blessing that is when you're already nervous about a health issue, which I was.
Yeah.
Members shared my expenses. There were zero problems. And let me tell you, having people pray with you when you call in with your need, that is just...
It is refreshing.
Yes, that's what it is.
What I keep telling people. People love Medishare, and they love saving tons of money, too. The typical family can save $500 a month.
I am very thankful for Medishare. It is so different, and I mean different in a very, very good way.
It is good different. Call now. They're easy to talk to, and you can get a price within 2 minutes. Call 833-44-BIBLE. That's 833-44-BIBLE. 833-44-BIBLE.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. And in more controversy and problems for the U.S. amid all of the ongoing conflict in Iran, ToddStarnes.com provided an update that a suspect in the New York City weekend terrorist attack near Gracie Mansion allegedly planned an assault, quote, bigger than the Boston Marathon bombing, federal prosecutors said in a criminal complaint Monday. And so Todd Starnes joins me now. And, you know, this is really concerning on a number of levels. And we've been talking throughout the show this morning about how not only, you know, the right is fractured over the escalations in Iran, whether to support President Trump or not, but it seems like there are active terror cells in the United States, and then just also some other individuals who clearly do not have an allegiance to the United States that are using this conflict as an opportunity to really take out aggression and terror across the United States. So what do you make of this particular attack overall?
Well, yeah, they're not allegations. They actually said this on police body cam footage that was then transcribed into the official police report. So these are the actual words of the Islamic jihadists. What I find really fascinating here is these individuals, 18 and 19 years old, from Pennsylvania. They came from very, well-off families. We understand one of the young men lived in a home with his parents valued at more than $2 million. The other lived in a home valued at more than $600,000. And it certainly appears as though they had something much larger planned. We understand that police in the Philadelphia area had raided a warehouse, or rather a storage facility, where they found something. Eyewitnesses, they're not saying what it is, but eyewitnesses heard loud bangs and pops as they were possibly defusing or dismantling, possibly more of these explosive devices. But Jenna, I think it's a warning, and it should be a wake up call that yes, there are people in this country, many of them Islamists, who want to harm Christians and Jews. Yesterday, on my Newsmax TV show, we interviewed New York City Councilwoman Joanne Areola, and she said flat out that Christians and Jews are simply not safe at this time in New York City.
That is really scary. And of course, you have a mayor who is a communist and who's someone who clearly, is not for American values in terms of his own personal life. And how much do you think that Mamdani's leadership has played into this? So, for example, if we had a different, perhaps Republican mayor of New York City, then Jews and Christians might be safer?
Well, even Andrew Cuomo, who was the scandal-plagued former governor of New York who ran against Mamdani and lost, even he said that he was disgusted by the mayor's reaction and response. The mayor's initial statement, by the way, attacked the victims, the would-be victims, calling them white supremacists, when in fact these were victims who were peacefully protesting. You may not like their message, and the message was that New York City is being overrun by the Islamists, and it is time to do something. So you may disagree with that message, but it is still protected free speech. And the mayor completely dismissed these concerns early on and was forced to backtrack. But even still, he refuses to call out Islamic terrorism. And if you remember a couple of weeks ago, Jenna, when there was a big snowstorm, and New York City police officers were injured when they were pelted by chunks of ice and snowballs, and the mayor simply dismissed it, refused to allow charges to be filed against those who attacked the police officers.
Yeah, and this is just escalating at a really alarming rate, and it seems like, at least on the conservative side, recognizing the threat that Islam poses to American values. I mean, this is actually nothing new. I think that this is just something that has gotten into the media a little bit more because of the conflict in Iran, of course, but because, we're actively seeing some of this worldview play out. And, these two initial Muslim men that we were talking about, I mean, they're only 18 and 19. I mean, these are really young individuals who are now, committing these acts of terrorism. This isn't just, people who have been here a really long time, and it's really concerning to see this. And yet there's a perception among some on the right and increasingly on the left that we just have to be completely tolerant as a society of anyone who wants to be here, any worldview. If we say anything against Muslims, then, the First Amendment protects them, and anything about Islam, well, then you're an Islamophobe. And that's obviously a mischaracterization and misunderstanding of what the First Amendment actually protects. But I don't know if you saw this, Todd. Yesterday, Representative Andy Ogles from Tennessee posted, "Muslims don't belong in American society. Pluralism is a lie." And of course, that went viral. It got community noted because people are, calling him out for undermining the First Amendment. And this kind of became a big controversy. But obviously, he was trying to be bombastic there. But the point remains that, Islam and Western values and Sharia law and U.S. constitutional law are fundamentally in conflict. And that is okay for Americans to consider and perhaps reconsider, especially who we let into this country and who is and is not following our laws.
It's a fair point, and I did hear what the congressman had to say, and I think that there is a concern about the numbers of Muslims that have been allowed into the country. I do believe that we are watching in real time the colonization of America. When you see the proliferation of mosques that are being built across the nation. Several years ago, the Southern Baptist Convention's Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission came under fire from Southern Baptists because they actually defended the building of a mosque I believe in the New Jersey area, somewhere up in the Northeast, and it became there was a court battle, and the Southern Baptists came alongside the Muslims and said yes, they should be allowed to build their mosque. Again, this is a very troubling thing because, as you pointed out, the teachings of Islam, which is really more of a theocracy, they do not mesh with the founding documents. So there is already a conflict there. And as we have seen in places like Paterson, New Jersey, and Dearborn, Michigan, when push comes to shove, Islam and Sharia takes precedent. And the concern I would have is, okay, what happens when the Islamists become the majority force in this country? And, Jenna, when you look at the data out there, it will not be terribly long before that happens.
Yeah, and we don't want to go the way of Europe and basically have a takeover and an invasion from within. I mean, this is exactly what the founders warned by domestic enemies. And this is where they were talking about. If there was any concern about hostile takeover, it would come likely from within.
Yes, and again, the challenge here is this is totally self-inflicted. The fact is, the previous administration allowed millions and millions of Islamists to come into this country. So the question now is, okay, what happens? And it's just really shocking to me that we've allowed this to go on so far, so long without taking any sort of action or without really considering the ramifications. I know Senator Tommy Tuberville from Alabama has been, and also Congressman Chip Roy out of Texas. Both men have been incredibly vocal, expressing grave concerns they have about the rise of Islam here in America. I actually write about this in my new book. It'll be out in May, called The Golden Age, How Trump Saved America. And the concern is we celebrate all the great things that have happened, but in the distance looming are these dark billowing clouds, which would be the rise of Islam in America.
Yeah, and it's really incredible, Todd Starnes. I think that we've allowed it to go this far under the name of religious pluralism and in the name of tolerance, and somehow Christians and I think a lot of the leftist Christians, like I'm thinking of, the David French sort of brand of, modern woke evangelical, who are looking at religious freedom from this lens that pluralism is actually a good and healthy thing. And it used to be that having, discriminating taste was actually a good thing. That was a virtue. And now suddenly, if you say that there's any standard at all, then somehow you're discriminating against a certain segment of religion or a population. And yet, here we are in 2026 having this conversation, reading headlines about these types of terrorist attacks and all of these other things that we now have to be concerned about on the home front, simply because perhaps conservatives and Republicans were too hesitant to actually stand up for American virtue and biblical values back, 20 and 30 years ago. So the question for today, I think, is, have we lost the plot so far that now there has been too much of an infiltration, or since we're at least not as far gone as Europe, is there still hope that if Congress rights this ship, that there are mass deportations, we do at least have a reclaiming of American law and virtue? There's still hope, perhaps, that we can right the ship before we go the way of an Islamic country.
Well, I hope so, and that was the point of really sounding the alarm bells in the book. I sat down for the Golden Age with our good friend Dr. Michael Youssef, and he is really one of the nation's experts on issues regarding Islam and Christianity. And, he says that this is a clear and present danger to the Republic, and it's something that has to be addressed. And again, when you take the oath, when you become an American citizen, you swear to renounce your previous country and your previous ways, and you embrace the American way of life. And if, people are in the country and they cannot do that, or they have not done that, I think we do need to take a very long, hard look at whether or not they should be allowed to remain here in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really hope that Congress is serious about this and that they don't take all of this leftist rhetoric and the attacks that, of course, are forthcoming, regardless of anything they do. I mean, the Democrats aren't going to like what the Republicans do, and they haven't for a while. And so it's shocking to me that Republicans still care about any of these name calling or, any of these false accusations. It's like, just go and do the right thing, regardless of what the Democrats say. But this seems to be a matter of political will for Republicans in Congress. And I have some hope that the newly founded, Sharia law caucus is going to be spearheading, hopefully, some legislation on this front. But really, immigration overhaul for our legal system needs to happen. And I just don't know if this current Congress or whatever we have after the midterms is going to have that political will sufficiently, Todd Starnes, to actually make any kind of meaningful reform.
I have very little hope of that happening, and I was quite frustrated. The president yesterday, speaking to congressional Republicans in Florida, in Miami, and it was almost as if the president had to beg his own party, members of his own party, just to pass the SAVE Act through the Senate, and yet the majority leader, John Thune, simply refuses to do that. So clearly, there are Republicans in Congress who have their own agenda. It is not the president's agenda, and they know that ultimately they do hold the upper hand because they have demonstrated in the past they're willing to lose their majority if it means stopping President Trump's agenda. They did that in the first Trump term in office, and it certainly looks as though they're trying to do that now. So I hope they get it together, Jenna, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree with you on that front, and it seems like Republicans are so willing to be in the minority because they simply don't want to govern. I mean, they prefer, it seems like, to be in the minority because then they can just go on, news programs like yours and mine and complain about the state of the world. But then when they actually have power, they don't actually govern and they don't get the job done that needs doing because they have all kinds of other priorities instead of actually serving the American people, upholding the U.S. Constitution, and getting done what needs to get done. So we can pray on that front. But Todd Starnes, really appreciate your commentary. As always, you can follow him on X at Todd Starnes. And of course, ToddStarnes.com is his media. And as always, you can reach me and my team, Jenna at AFR.net.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.